Yo, what is going on, guys? Huggy Guy 1 here. Welcome to my review of The Good Dinosaur. The Good Dinosaur is directed by Peter Sohn and stars Raymond Akoya, Jack Bright, Sam Elliott, Anna Paquin, Steve Zahn, and Jeffrey Wright. So the story is basically about Arlo, who is born to this family, and eventually his father ends up dying, and is part of the reason why. So he ends up going after him, causing him to be far away from his home. So he has to try to find his way home, going across a bunch of different obstacles, like seeing a bunch of other dinosaurs, and like running away from these other dinosaurs, and has to try and find his way back home. So I do feel like the story does really work. I mean, going to see Arlo's whole journey does feel like it really works out well. I mean, just kind of looking at it, and it's kind of substantial, right? And it does kind of work for the most part. I mean, kind of looking at it, he's going on a journey. He meets in all these paths, and as I go, it's longer. I mean, they do a very good job, kind of phrasing out the story. I mean, it does really feel like he did a good job with it, and it also feels like just this whole journey is kind of engaging. I mean, it's very continuous throughout, and I do feel like just this kind of story and trying to get back home does really work for it, and I do feel like just the way it's executed here even works, as it's pretty much they try and you're trying to find his whole way back, and I do feel like that does really work. So the structure is pretty good. I mean, you got the first act, which pretty much, it kind of starts out weirdly, if I'm being honest. I mean, it does have showing how the meteor went by as other dinosaurs are still here during the human age, which is kind of just an explanation of this, and then it kind of goes to Arlo being born along with his brothers and getting all these training tips from his father, and his father kind of telling him what to do, and his Spot kind of in his way, but then his father did end up dying, and it's kind of causing the second act, which is also a really good act. I mean, I do feel like just the whole journey is the most interesting part of this film, and is what really is executed well. I mean, it continues on to it and does make sense. And then there's the third act, pretty much where Arlo finally turns home, and even Spot kind of goes back to his family, and I do like that ending. I mean, it feels very satisfying for the way this movie ends. I mean, it makes sense for the whole character growth of this movie, and really work out well, and just how well this movie's ending is just makes it feel satisfying in a way. The pacing is not the best, but it does feel kind of like an hour and 30-minute movie. I mean, it is fine in some ways. I mean, and sometimes it does feel like scenes connect with each other, and does, but I mean, later on I'll get to it, but I do have some flaws with the pacing, but some things that I kind of liked about it. I mean, I do think that some things that does connect well. I mean, it does connect well when it goes from one act to another, but there are some pacing in this that doesn't work that I'll get to later. Arlo's character does feel like it was done well. I mean, pretty much just the whole path he kind of has to go on through this journey, and all these lessons that he kind of has to learn, is what really makes him a good character. I mean, just kind of looking at him, he's kind of just, at first, kind of scared of a lot of things, but over time, throughout the journey, she's kind of tries to let go of his fear, and kind of learns that fear is a part of life, and it makes sense. And I do really like that kind of message that it kind of sends in them. I mean, it's how you learn that over time does really work. I mean, he wants to try to let go of his fear, but then he kind of realizes that there's no reason to let go of it, because everyone gets scared, which I do feel like that whole part of his character is what I really like about him. It's not the fact that he's overly scared. I like the message it kind of sends with him being overly scared, and that's what I kind of feel like is the whole point of his character. I mean, it's just to send you a message that it's kind of okay to be scared of things, because that's just normal. I do think that message was perfectly executed well well, as it does kind of like have him have a few stories, and even that one scene with both even then was a pretty good scene. You know, with where they kind of learns it and kind of like tells it more about it, even if that's really like one of the only scenes with both that actually kind of matters. Spot is an adorable character, and I do feel like in this movie they do execute it well. I mean, to kind of have an adorable character, he kind of like kept executed in a way that it still somewhat has character. Other than that, and I do feel like they did a pretty good job there with Spot. I mean, pretty much you can see he's just kind of a human being, and it's kind of like going around. And I do really like how in the end, even when they kind of like showed him having a family, I mean, that just kind of like makes him more character. And I do feel like just that whole kind of character was executed well just by doing that. And I do feel like just the way they execute Spot in this movie is just beyond perfection. I mean, just the way he kind of like helps Arlo around. It's just niceness out things and helps him out. This kind of like shows his character traits, and even with that, you can even see how he is as a family, and I do think that they did a great job with his character. And Arlo's father is very inspirational. I mean, he's definitely kind of done as the kind of inspirational kind of father, and I do feel like it is executed well inside of this story. I mean, what they do with him is just really works out well. I mean, just the way he kind of helps Arlo throughout the way, and just the way he kind of runs his family and helps them use the message. And I do feel like just the messages he sends throughout this movie just really work as he's just trying to help Arlo, trying to get over his fears and just trying to tell him to do nothing wrong. And I do really think that they do an overall good job with his character, just in a way that really works out well. To the fact that I do feel like it is kind of to my style upon, if I'm being honest. And I do really think that they did a great job with his character. And the voice acting is very good. I mean, Raymond Ochoa, I mean, as Arlo, and he does do a very good job. I mean, it's the way he sells the screaming kind of aspect when he's scared, and just the way he delivers his lines on point, and it does feel like he's really selling it off. And then especially there is Jeffrey Wright as his father. I do feel like that's a standout of this movie, as he does do a very good job, and overall does really feel like the character and is still executing it. And then most voice actors, I'd say, overall does do a pretty good job. Animation is just fantastic, as always, coming from Pixar. I mean, Pixar rarely ever has bad animation, and I do think this movie is no exception. I mean, just looking at the backgrounds of this, it's like really stunning. I mean, just the way that they look, it kind of feels very realistic in a type of way, and I do feel like just when they look at a mountain, it does kind of like look like a mountain, and it does really look realistic. And then the character design, I mean, human design is pretty much like a normal human design, nothing wrong with it. I mean, it looks like a normal human being in an animated movie, so I feel like they did an overall good job with it. And then the dinosaurs, I do feel like look pretty good. I mean, you know, obviously, like, they don't look as real, the backgrounds might not fit in as well, but I do feel like they do look good as a character design. So it does, I mean, it does kind of feel like a dinosaur. I mean, each one is kind of tall and like as tall as they are in real life, and it's kind of how I look at it, and they do a good job and making it render, and especially when they're moving, it does really feel smooth, and to the point where it really does feel like they are moving. That said, this movie does have its negatives, kind of starting out with the pacing, like you said earlier. I mean, there are issues with it. I mean, there's some scenes in the second act that I feel like could have probably been dropped. I mean, just kind of looking at that scene with that one dinosaur, like, that has all these animals on him, like, just that scene just kind of feels useless. I mean, if I'm being honest, I mean, it kind of feels like I was just there to pad the runtime. I mean, since that character didn't really serve a purpose to the plot, it doesn't really make that much sense to put it there. And even with that, I do feel like it is kind of overall just doesn't really work. work for this movie, and just that one scene there, and that's just kind of like one of the main parts where the pacing doesn't work. There are definitely a decent amount of characters that aren't very good. I mean, Arlo's mother doesn't really do much. I mean, it doesn't really feel much like a mother figure that much. It doesn't really do that much, if I'm being honest. And the same thing with like his sibling, they don't really do that much and don't really feel like they serve that much of a purpose to the plot. Then, as I said earlier, like that one dinosaur, like that has all the birds on him and all these animals, I don't feel like he serves a purpose to the plot. I mean, it barely has any character and is really only in one scene. And then there's Bulk and Hanskin. I mean, I guess they do kind of serve a purpose, but there's really only one thing of them that really feels like they serve a purpose, just kind of just the tips that they gave Arlo, that's basically it. Other than that, I do feel like they have very little character with really nothing much to them, if I'm being honest. And then, like, the villains, I don't really remember the name of them, like, I mean, I guess they're kind of villains. I mean, they're just trying to stop Arlo when trying to get Spot. I mean, they just don't work at all. I mean, they barely feel like they serve a purpose, and they're kind of the closest thing to this movie has to an antagonist, and they just barely are in the movie, and honestly don't really serve that much of a purpose, if I'm being honest. This movie isn't too reliant on humor, but like, it definitely does use humor sometimes, and honestly, when it does use it, it doesn't really work that much, if I'm being honest. I mean, it's just kind of like shows Arlo and Spawn kind of like getting high on these things, and it's honestly not really that funny of a joke, if I'm being honest. And whenever this movie uses jokes, it just kind of feels kind of random, and it doesn't really feel like they work. So overall, The Good Dinosaur is a pretty good movie, but it is definitely on the weaker side of the Pixar movies. So I'm gonna give The Good Dinosaur a 7 out of 10. That was my review of The Good Dinosaur. What are your thoughts on The Good Dinosaur? Tell me in the comments below. I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.